folks. My name is Suzanne, most commonly known on this plane as, please excuse my wiggling around here first time, as Stone Feather Eagle Bear, Medicine Y Moon. I am a modern day medicine woman, born and raised in the far north in the Yukon. I've been thinking about doing this for quite a few years now, 2018 actually. I wanted to share my life story, so to speak, with all you folks out there. It's been a very interesting, exciting, eccentric, eclectic, kind of like myself, life adventure. I was born in the far northern woods of the Yukon, in the mountains, lived in the subarctic for most of my life. I'm a certified trapper, wilderness guide, bush cook, general overall wild woman. I wanted to talk to you guys about my journey. I was raised up on the lake shore of a giant freezing lake in the north. Not a kind of lake that you would play in. Could cause your demise. We were born to not go in the water. Much to my chagrin, I was a lover of water and still am. I was born originally, though, let's start at the start here. My parents met when they were teenagers. My dad, I think, was probably 19 going on 20 when he first met my mother. My mother and her siblings were born and raised in the far north, as were, her father and great-grandmother and so on and so on and so on, back to 50,000 plus years. Parts of my ancestry have been on the land here in North America, great-grandmother turtle. Since the beginning, we never did cross any land bridge. I come from the sacred territory of the beautiful Tahltan people in the northwestern British Columbia, right next door to the Yukon. My mother ended up in the Yukon. Her parents met and were in Atlin, British Columbia in the 30s. My grandfather did underground mining there for gold, crawling around on your elbows and knees. He said it was a terrible, terrible thing and would never do it again. My grandmother and her sister were the first two white women, so to speak, to ride their horses over the Stuart Cassiar Mountains into the Telegraph Creek area where my grandfather resided. There they met and became married, moved to Atlin, gold mined. The Alaska Highway was built. My grandfather and grandmother built a lodge on the Alaska Highway, quite famous and very long running. 36 years it ran, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. I was greatly appreciated in a very, very busy place when I was a little child, when the Alaska Highway was the winding gravel road that they talk about. Been there, done that, lived it, rode the wagon, got the t-shirt. Just saying. Yes, I've had many adventures, many adventures I'd like to share with you. I hope to go chronologically, but I may skip around a little bit as I speak. More and more stories come forth, and I tried to write them down, but it's easier to just speak about it, and maybe we'll write about it later. So my parents met there on the Alaska Highway at my grandparents' lodge. Vibrant and vital aspect of the Alaska Highway in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. many, many fond memories at Grandma's house on the Alaska Highway, Rancheria Mile 710, Grandma and Grandpa's, built by my hands, by the hands, I should say, of my grandfather and my grandmother. From the ground up, a restaurant, a lounge, a hotel, a motel, a gas station, a garage, all built by them, the way it used to be, where they lived and raised their family all their life. My mother's brothers brought home a friend one year, who then became my father after a few years of knowing each other. So I was born in Whitehorse, Yukon, in the early 60s. A little preemie. I didn't really know what to do with little preemies at that time. Not much cuddling or affection or any of those things that humans need, let alone little tiny beings. My parents lived at Swift River at that time, which is just a short distance to mile 710. After that, my father working for Canadian National Telecommunication when he was a young man. And in those days on the Alaska Highway, there were many little communities that were needed, but they were vital as well. They kept the roads up, kept the infrastructure up, kept the pipeline flowing, took care of the little airports, took care of all the highways, made sure that the snow was gone. My dad took care of telecommunication. So we had microwave stations back then that had to be taken care of up on the mountains. As a consequence, you got transferred from one little community to another. They would provide us with a home by the company, and each little company that worked in the community, whether it was highways or public works or like my father communication, each little set of homes for the employees were a little bit different. Very interesting. Sorry, my dog is snoring here at the end of the bed. I hope it's not interfering too much. So I'm just trying to give him a little bit of a kick. Yeah, it's due to him being allowed on my bed at this time. So he's enjoying his sleep. Anyway, my parents lived in Swift River. Had a beautiful little lodge there as well. About, let's say, how far? 15 miles away from 710. And my grandparents were great friends with the people that ran the other little lodge down the highway. There were many of them, each one individual and unique unto its own self. After my parents lived at Swift River when I was a tiny little child, home from the hospital and the incubator, and I guess I was quite a little character. According to my mother, I had potty trained myself by the time I was 8 months old. Refused to wear wet clothes. Would only wear my hair in a certain style. on top of my head like a palm tree. An interesting side note here. In the native tradition, and in the Tlingit folks, which I have some in my bloodline, there have been beings that are born with red, super curly hair. They wear it on a palm on top of their head, like a palm tree. Even though they've never seen a palm tree, I'm sure, being from the Yukon. They are the carriers of the stories, storytellers, those that gather and remember all the news and all that goes on between the communities of old. The history keepers, I would imagine. The scribes, I guess, is what they would say in Old English. And that's the way I'd like to have my hair by the time I was, 1 year old, maybe? I don't know. I'd have to ask my mother. Quite a little character I was. Apparently, I used to like to eat plants. And I have a story of gumming up a great big beetle one day, which my mother promptly popped out of my mouth. And for most of my life, I've had a beetle thing. So, just saying, childhood does affect us. Yes, love your inner child, folks. It's the only way to heal. Just saying. From Swift River, my parents moved to Canyon Creek. Now, when we were still at Swift River, we must have been there till I was about 3-ish, I would imagine. Because I do remember things like playing with little children and getting my tongue stuck on a metal swing. When you're a little child in the north, the crystals on the build up on the metal when it's very, very cold out. Tempting to stick your tongue on and lick them up like a popsicle. Do not. Your tongue will stick to the metal pole. It is not fun. I remember being stuck there till my mother came with some warm water, poured it over my tongue, between my tongue and the metal till it let loose. Never did that again. Doesn't take me an hour and a half to watch 60 Minutes, even as a little child. I was a brilliant little child. I was brilliant. I knew many, many things, as we all do when we're coming onto this earth plane. It's just when we get here and get all gobbed up by everybody else's expectations and sticky fingers on the globe of our soul that we become who they say we are, want us to be, etc. All that jazz. Don't fall for it, folks. It's a trick. Keep your uniqueness, is all I say. It's very important. I do remember going to my grandmother's and grandfather's cabin. So they worked at Rancheria, which they built and run. And then they holidayed at a place called Downy Lake. The most beautiful little spot ever. Yes. Many fond memories of Downy Lake. The cabin at Downy Lake. The grandmother and grandfather. Grandma Doris and Grandpa Bud. Beautiful, beloved beings. Taught me a lot about living in the bush, being a pioneer woman, taking care of myself, how to cook on a wood stove, how to chop wood, how to hunt, how to fish, all those things, berry picking, mushroom picking, making bread, making corn mousse, making potted mousse, making jams, making cookies. Many, many things our grandparents shared with not only myself, but I'm sure with the rest of the grandchildren as well at Downy Lake. I have very fond memories of that place all through my childhood. It was very close to Swift River and Rancheria, so it was nice for my grandparents. They could whip up there and take a little time out. So awfully, awfully busy at Rancheria. After my parents lived at Swift River, and my grandmother and grandfather were, busy, busy, busy at Rancheria each and every day, my father got transferred to a place called Canyon Creek. Now, Canyon Creek would be like 300 and something miles away. Now, this is old days, so miles away, 700 kilometers, roughly, from my grandmother up north. So that's the area, getting close to the area where I spent most of my childhood. Canyon Creek, my memories of Canyon Creek as a little child, I got sent away to my grandmother and grandfather's home. So I have a little bit of memories there, but not too many. I spent time living with my grandparents. My understanding is my mother was pregnant and was not feeling well, so I stayed with my grandparents during that pregnancy, where I went to school. The time I was like 4, I was reading grade 1 level and beyond books, spelling. It's easy for me. Spent some time there with my grandparents. It was a quiet time, nice time. Wore a little uniform, went to private school, which I hated. It was only grade 1, but, I was just a little tiny girl being a preemie, and then grew promptly tall and slender, even in grade 1. I got bullied and picked on because I was not that big. Not yet, anyways. Then I went home to my family in the Yukon after spending time with my grandparents on Vancouver Island. They had a beautiful home there on a country property. I went to private school. I could have had it all. Didn't know that, though, did I? We only know what we know when we know it, folks. That's all. That's all there is to it. So we can only do what we do with the knowledge that we have at the time that we have it. And therefore I say to you, forgive yourself. You did the best that you could. When I got back to Canyon Creek as a little child, when my mother and father met me at the airport, I was mortified. When I left, my mother had long, beautiful brunette hair, dark brown eyes. My mom's very beautiful. When I came back, she'd changed. She cut her hair all off into some kind of a beehive thing, latest trend, and had a little weight on from just having another baby. I didn't think it was my mother at all. I remember saying, "You're not my mom. I've been away for over a year, I'm sure. I'm just a little girl." And I had a baby sister. Nobody bothered to tell me anything about it, you know? In those days, I guess. 4 years old or more, I had a great, I would have had a good understanding that I had a little sister. Never really bonded with anybody then. My parents are my sister, and that's unfortunate. Always been to my own self most of my life. Had a few friends around, but not really. Not anybody that I let know me. Nobody took the time to see me. The brilliant, talented, intelligent, gifted child. A feral child. Not understood. Nor did I understand. As a little child that a lot of folks were not like myself. I thought everybody out here lived with the fairies and talked to the trees and, could see energy and knew about the supernatural, astral travel, lucid dreams. Everybody does that. That's just commonplace. It's just part of our human experience. This has been my life since I was a little child. Seeing, hearing, feeling, knowing, tasting, smelling, all that is here. Buffeted around in the wind like a dandelion seed. Misunderstood. Built up the wall, By the time I was 12 or 13, it was complete. But I digress. I have many beautiful and fond memories of the Yukon as well. Wonderful times camping with my mother and father, my little sister, little tiny pixie, beautiful little sister. Also a very gifted little being. Which then, this fueled my thing that everybody was like us. Yeah. She could see, too. The other beings, the other side camp. Ghosts and energies and fairies and beings that share this planet with us. There's much more out there than you know, my dear. There's much, much more. Just saying. I knew this as a little child from the age of 3 on. And then to have a little sister that could also see and feel. I'm not sure what all of her gifting is. Clairvoyant. Used to talk with her without speaking. So much fun. She'd look at me and say, "You're doing it again, aren't you?" I still do it for fun. Send a message to folks and telepathically. And then I get a big kick out of it when they answer me vocally, verbally. Then they look at me like, "Did you just ask me a question?" Yes, I did, but not out loud. So much fun for me. So here I am now, 4 or 5 years old. I already did the grade 1. I remember catching a teeny tiny little wee YUKON froggy with my father. The Canyon Creek Bridge, and we call it Canyon Creek, but they call it the Asiac River now. Canyon Creek, they still call the little settlement there. When I was there, it had a lodge and some houses for the telecommunication people, and there were some beautiful native folks there. I used to love to go and visit the elders, even though I was just a little girl. It was one of my favorite things to do. Go across the highway and go to visit with an old native couple that lived down by the river in a log cabin. I'll have to ask my parents who they were. I think it was a pretty famous old couple from the Yukon, well-known native folks, some beautiful elders. Yeah. Used to go have tea with them. They'd feed me gopher stew and squirrel stew and stuff. I've eaten all kinds of things, my dears, all kinds of things growing up in the woods. It's been an adventure, let me tell you. From there, we know we must have left quite quickly, because the next memory I have then is of the place that I spent most of my younger years, like grade 1 to grade 6. When I got there, I was so little at this place called Destruction Bay on a huge lake called Kawani Lake. Brr. Not very many places to stick your toes in Kawani Lake without getting hypothermia in about 5 minutes flat. There are a few folk places now that the water's gone down and it's created some shallow areas that warm up in the 24-hour sun, but when I was a little girl there, it was quite a dangerous place to be. Although we did play along the water's edge, of course, as children will. So much fun. Getting wet, especially when we're told not to come home wet after school. We go down and play on a raft in this little bay and get wet, of course. Anyway, when we first got there, my little sister, she must have just been a little baby, a little one. Because I was, they put me back into grade 1 because they didn't know and they didn't realize that I'd already done that and was beyond the grade 1 level. Because I was still only 5 years old at that time. And then they skipped me ahead into grade 3 because I would already be on grade 2. And we went on from there. I think my little sister, I don't think, she might have been going into kindergarten by then, I'm not sure. She's close to 4 years younger than myself. 3.5. So, yeah, She might have been just a little schmoobert. She would only have been 2.5, going on 3. Okay. So darn cute. I remember for Christmas one year, they had those walking dolls or out, where you could hold the hand and walk with it. It was quite a big doll. And my little sister got one for Christmas. It was just as big as her. Just about. So darn cute. She always reminded me of a little pixie when she was a little girl. Yeah. We lived here at Destruction Bay till, going into grade 6. And at that time in the Yukon Territory, there was only one high school in the whole Yukon Territory. There was only 20,000 people, give or take, living in the whole territory at the time when I was a little child there. All the roads were gravel, about 1.5 lanes wide. Really? Not joking. Oh my gosh. Tell you what. Anyway, the next section of the story would be like from getting settled in, grade 3. Well, we were there for 6 years. So yeah. It was a lot of fun. We left there 1973. We would have left there. So yeah, maybe 5 years there. Would have been about it. But we had a lot of fun there, Trisha and I. At Destruction Bay, we learned how to tie up our own hooks onto our fishing rods by the time we were, probably 4 years old. My sister probably even younger, because she used to hang out with us and go fishing and hunting and all those things ever since she was just a little girl. Yeah. And that could be the beginning of another story. And I'm just giving you a very kind of brief overview of my life. There's many other little stories in between that story that I just started. As a little wee child, a window, we had push-up windows, wooden frame, single pane, thank goodness, fell on my tiny little arm when we lived in Swift River. I wouldn't let anybody touch it except my grandmother, who lived 14, 15 miles away, 33 kilometers. And she put down her work and came to me to help me. That's the kind of folks Northerners are, my dear. There's little stories like that, as well as sticking your tongue onto frozen things. Don't do it. And many other wonderful times fishing and berry picking and hanging with my cousins in the snow and at Christmas, and lots of stories from Grandma and Grandpa's house. Right now we're just settling in. My little sister is maybe going on 3, 2, I'm going on 5, 6. We're settling into Destruction Bay. Vibrant little community at that time. Lots of folks around. Lots of fun things going on. We'll talk about that next. I got a lot to share with you, my dears. You have a wonderful solstice. Whatever you plan to do this evening. Bless you all. It's 3:53 in the PM. bless you. Bye for now.